Yeah, it's the dweller, putting it down for all the sanctified and holy, worldwide, universal, keeping it non-commercial. This is Darkness to Light Productions, bringing you the holy and divine instructions.
In addition to proving the authenticity of our wisdom, good works also prove from where we access our wisdom. And so not only do we live righteous to prove the sincerity of our wisdom, but number two, we must live righteous to prove the source of our wisdom. Our behavior demonstrates who we know. We prove the source, firstly, through purity. We must have a pure heart. Let's look at verse 13. He says, "But if you have bitter envying and strife in your hearts, glory not and lie not against the truth." James dealt in the previous portion of this chapter with how teachers were offending others with their tongue. Now he's asking them to go further, to go beyond the tongue and to make a self-examination of their hearts. Yes, the tongue controls the body, but there's something that controls the tongue, and that is the heart of man. And James, what we believe, and I believe, and others believe to be the brother of Jesus, throughout this entire epistle, uses little hints and suggestions from the life of Jesus and from the teaching of Jesus. And one of those was the Sermon on the Mount. In Matthew 5:8, Jesus said, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." It's those who have a pure heart who will be able to see God. And so when he's saying make sure that you have a pure heart, not only is it to see God, but it's because you must demonstrate that you not only know what you're teaching, but that you're living what you're teaching. Harboring bitter envy and strife is self-destruction. Just as a fountain cannot produce sweet water and bitter water, the heart of a Christian should not have conflicting actions. Not only must our hearts be pure, but the well of our wisdom must be pure. And so we have purity of heart, but we also need purity of origination. And there are two types of origination. We see that in verse 15. "The wisdom descendeth not from above, but is earthly, sensual, devilish. For where envying and strife is, there is confusion in every evil work. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, and easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy." The heart that possesses bitter envy and strife and selfish ambition can trace its source back to the world, the flesh, or the devil. Anytime you see evil, anytime you see confusion, anytime you see strife, you can bet that the source of that outcome is either the world, the flesh, or the devil. Furthermore, if we are not willing to examine our own hearts, if we're not willing to tackle our own inner man, we can examine the results of our actions. If we don't want to look at our heart, look at what we produce. Because we just read that where there's envy and strife and selfish ambition, that's not a godly origination. And while ungodly wisdom may have three sources, we see here that godly wisdom only has one source, and that's the Father of lights. It's a heavenly origination. James refers to this origin of wisdom as from above. He says this wisdom is from above. Here, wisdom is best described as knowledge and practice of the requisites for godly and upright living. In other words, this type of wisdom means that you not only understand what you're reading, but you practice what you're reading. That's the basic form of wisdom. You've all heard it said about Proverbs that wisdom is applying knowledge. And here the wisdom that comes from God is applying the Holy Scriptures. We have people that can quote scriptures sometimes more than we know, but they're not applying it. And that's what the Bible refers to as the fool or the folly, because he has an understanding of God's word but refuses to live according to God's word. In the first chapter of this epistle, James sets up the idea and the theme of wisdom. In verse 5, he says, if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God. So if we know that God's wisdom is from above, then it's only natural that we ask him for that wisdom. And how do we know that this wisdom comes from God? Because it is first and foremost pure. In fact, in theology proper, the attributes of God, you learn that God is holy. And a holy God must give holy wisdom, because holiness emanates from him to us. Building on the fact that we ask God for wisdom, James shows the purity of that wisdom in verse 17 of chapter 1 when he says, every good and every perfect gift is from above and cometh down from the Father of lights. So if I'm to ask God for wisdom and everything that he gives is good and perfect, it naturally follows that the wisdom that God gives is good and perfect. In other words, it's pure. As we demonstrate a pure origin through a pure heart, we engage in conflict resolution. So not only do we prove the source through purity, but we also, number 2, prove the source through peacemaking. In this epistle, we see that there was contention between rich Christians and poor Christians. We see that there were others who were abusing their fellow Christians with their tongue. And in the first verse of chapter 4, we see that there are wars and infightings among the same community. Notice the reason, though, for such hostility in chapter 4, verse 1. From whence come wars and fightings among you? Come they not hence, even of your lust that war in your members? So here he's building on this idea that the wisdom that does not come from above is earthly, is sensual, is of the devil, because it's it's a heart issue, and it's leading them with ungodly lust, ungodly desire, selfish ambition to fight and to war among each other. But we must look to the Prince of Peace in order for us to demonstrate peace in this world. James, again, alluding to the teachings of Christ, his Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5:9, Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Now here James is saying, if you want to be wise, show me your good deeds. Jesus says that those who make peace are identified as God's children. So there's a similarity here, a common thread, that your actions, making peace, identifies you as being wise, and it also identifies you as being a child of God. Once you become a peacemaker, it flows right into being gentle and reasonable and full of mercy, because you are showing love one to another. If you make peace, the rest of these descriptions in verse number 17 naturally flow from being a peacemaker, because if you're a peacemaker, you'll be gentle. If you're a peacemaker, you'll be full of mercy. If you're a peacemaker, you'll be reasonable, because you want to make sure that you resolve the conflict and that you show love one to another. And as we become peacemakers, we produce a peaceful community.